They called it a psychological study. But in truth, it was something far darker. Hidden deep within Soviet archives for nearly 4 decades, it became known by a single code word, sever, meaning in Russian, north. But among those who whispered about it, it carried another meaning. To sever, to cut, to divide. This is the story of the experiment that split a man in two. It begins in the winter of 1962, a time when the world itself was on the edge of fracture. The Cuban Missile Crisis had just brought humanity within inches of annihilation. Moscow and Washington were locked in a dance of shadows and silence. Every mind, every secret, every human life became a weapon. And somewhere near Novosibirsk, inside a concrete research facility that did not exist on any map, the Soviet Academy of Sciences opened a new division. They called it the Institute for Neuropsychological Defense. Its goal was simple, at least on paper: to study the limits of the human mind under stress. But its real mission was something only a few in the Kremlin ever knew. The Soviets had seen something. Captured during the Korean War, an American pilot. He spoke of something the U.S. Air Force had allegedly begun, a project designed to erase fear from soldiers, to make men who could kill without hesitation. Moscow panicked. If the West could control emotion, they could control the future. And so, the Soviets began their own program. At its center was a man named Major Alexander Vorin. 36 years old, decorated hero of the Great Patriotic War. A survivor of Stalingrad. Vorin had seen death, carried it on his shoulders, and somehow lived through it. He believed in the party, he believed in science. And above all, he believed in service. When he volunteered for the experiment, he was told it would be a test of endurance. He would be helping the motherland understand the resilience of the human brain. He signed the papers without hesitation. He had no idea he was signing away his soul. The experiment began with simple conditioning: sleep deprivation, sensory isolation, monotone auditory signals, repetition of phrases, first in his own voice, then distorted through machines. You are loyal. You are whole. You are one. For weeks, Vorin endured. Doctors observed from behind glass. Electrodes mapped his brainwaves as he stared at a wall of shifting lights. At first he resisted, calm, disciplined, a soldier. Then something strange began to happen. He started referring to himself in the plural. Not I but we. He spoke to himself in conversations. One voice firm and rational. The other colder, distant, almost mocking. He said one side of him wanted to serve. The other wanted to destroy. The scientists called it the split response. They believed they had triggered a form of induced dissociation, two identities, coexisting within one body. And rather than stop the experiment, they pushed further. They wanted to see how far they could divide a man and still call him human. By spring, Vorin was no longer the man he once was. Half of him remained the disciplined officer. The other half cunning, unpredictable, violent. They began separate conditioning for each side. One part of him was rewarded for obedience, warmth, food, praise. The other was punished, cold, hunger, silence. Then came the next phase. A wall of mirrors. Vorin stood before it, unsure which reflection was real. Each day, he was told a different story about who he was. One day, a hero of the state. The next, a traitor awaiting execution. His mind slowly began to tear apart. The lead scientist, Dr. Pavel Korovin, wrote in his notes, "We have successfully created a division of consciousness. The subject's left hemisphere obeys command and reason. The right rejects it. We have made two men share one body. By summer, the experiment was complete, or so they thought. Voron's physical health deteriorated. He began to speak of dreams, standing before his own corpse, unable to tell if he was the one alive or dead. He told the nurse on duty, "I hear him breathing inside me." And then, one night in August 1963, the experiment ended violently. Cameras recorded the last minutes before the blackout. Voron sits alone, restrained to a chair, whispering to himself. Then suddenly, he looks up straight into the lens and smiles. Not the smile of a broken man, but of two men who had made peace with something unspeakable. The lights flicker. The recording stops. When guards entered the room, they found two identical sets of footprints leading in opposite directions, though only one man had been inside. The official report said Major Voron died during a psychotic episode. The lab was sealed, documents destroyed, every witness reassigned to remote postings across Siberia. Project Sever vanished like it had never existed. But 30 years later, when the Soviet Union collapsed, a single folder surfaced from the KGB's Division P, Psychological Operations. Inside, fragments of Korovin's notes, photographs of Voron during the trial phases, and one haunting line scrawled across the final page. "He walks beside me still." To this day, no one knows what truly happened inside that lab. Some say Voron died, his mind shattered. Others, especially among former researchers, claim he survived, that he was transferred to a mental facility under a different name, that he lived out his years, convinced there was another man walking in his skin. And yet, one document, dated 1972, adds another layer to the mystery. A memo from a Soviet border outpost describes a man detained near Finland. His fingerprints matched those of Alexander Voron, but his face did not. The report was buried, classified above top secret. Today, historians call it a myth, a Cold War ghost story. But behind every myth lies a shadow of truth. The files were real. The institute existed. And fragments of the technology, the sound patterns, the conditioning scripts, would later reappear in experiments on mind control, conducted not only in the Soviet Union, but also in the United States. MKUltra, Bluebird Artichoke, programs that mirrored the same obsession. To find out where the human self ends and where control begins. Major Alexander Voron was not the first victim of that obsession. And he would not be the last. Because once a government learns it can split a man in two, it never stops trying. The story doesn't end in the past. In the late 1990s, a journalist named Irina Markova began investigating rumors of a surviving scientist from the project, Dr. Korovin's assistant. She found him in Prague, living under a new identity. When asked if Project Sever was real, he said only one thing before closing the door. "We didn't split a man. We uncovered what was already there." 3 weeks later, he was found dead in his apartment. No signs of struggle. No signs of robbery. Just one item missing from his desk, an old photograph of a soldier standing before a mirror. Maybe Voron was never split at all. Maybe he was the first man to truly meet himself and lose the war within. Either way, the experiment that split a man in two wasn't just about one soldier. It was about all of us. How far we're willing to go to control what we fear, and how easily the line between truth and madness can disappear when science serves power. Because in the end, the greatest Cold War experiment wasn't about weapons or nations or ideology. It was about the human mind and the terrifying truth that it may be the most dangerous battlefield of all.